Hello, this is Giselle Thompson. Thank you for coming to the Live the Life You Want speaker series. Our goal here is to learn more practical and strategies and ideas on how to overcome adversity, be happy, and live the life that you want. I wanted to do this because I had to overcome some challenges in my life that, of course, made me stronger, but also helped me realize that dreams are possible, and I'm in the process of making those dreams real. And I want to share with you some ideas that can help you. Today I have Michael Lifshitz here with me, and he's such an amazing person. I met Michael several years ago, and he has a condition called multiple congenital musculoskeletal abnormalities. In addition to wearing an artificial leg, he walks with a cane and uses a wheelchair for longer distances. Contrary to what many people would believe, he became a chartered accountant, also obtained an MBA from Edinburgh Business School. He's built and sold successful accounting and financial planning practices, and today is as CFO and co-founder of Breakaway Experiences. So Michael's living the life that he wants, and I thought he would be a fabulous interviewer for us. Since I met him a few years ago, he's funny and supportive. When I was thinking about my project, it's been a few years now, he was very encouraging. I live with and continue to live with my partner who has a disability, and Michael understood immediately what goes with that when you're making adjustments in your life, living with people you love who just need those adjustments. You love doing it, you just need to figure it out, and Michael got it right away, and that was great. So today, Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
And we're going to focus today on the topic of success on your own terms. So how about if I just hand it over to you, Michael, and you can share with us what your experiences have been about living success on your own terms.
Okay, thank you, Giselle, and thank you for having me. So I think the reason I was saying about success on your own terms is I think, so as you mentioned, I've had a disability since birth. So for me, it's very normal. And I think growing up, I always wanted to be considered normal, whatever that means. And I just wanted to show that I could be like everyone else. So I used to play street hockey and play with kids and do all the rest of the stuff. Now, granted, during the summers, often I'd have operations and to correct things. So that part wasn't maybe not as normal. But I always tried to be like everyone else and prove that I was like everyone else. And I think, so if we fast forward when probably the late 90s, I started slowing down a little bit and not being able to walk as much because the nature of my condition, part of the abnormalities was, a big part was that I was born without hips. So when I was a kid, they actually constructed the hips, and over time it kind of wore down, right? So it became a little bit more difficult for me to walk. So I mean, when I was in university back in the mid-90s, I mean, I'd go out dancing with friends, go to clubs. I remember I once was at training, and we were all up dancing, and I was up on a stage and dancing away the whole night, largely because it was too hard to get on and off the stage. So once I was on, I just stayed on. But as I kind of wore out my hips, I like to joke that my hips, I'm now 41, my hips are probably 65 to 80, depending on the day we're talking about. So as my hips wore out, I started walking a little bit less. But I was a little stubborn in that I didn't want any additional devices. And then in 2003, I decided, you know what? I actually saw it. They say TV is not educational, but it actually was a commercial on US TV for a store called the Scooter Store. And there were these elderly people riding around on their scooters going out. And I'm like, that actually looks kind of cool. So I started looking into the scooter, and through some conversation with professionals, realized that a wheelchair would work better. An electric wheelchair would work better for me, largely because scooters are not heavy enough to go in ice, on ice. And anybody living in Canada kind of understands the fact ice is an inevitable part of living. Well, at the time I was living in Quebec, but be it Montreal or Ottawa, you're going to have to deal with some ice. So I got the electric wheelchair. And what I realized when I got the chair, I actually realized two things. On one hand, I realized I was silly to not get it sooner because, and this is a very, not the most significant example, but in terms of living the life you want and being happy, I always liked going out in Montreal. The Jazz Festival had the free shows, right? So when I was in CEGEP University, I would go out to the free shows, and then I stopped because it became too much walking. But then once I got the wheelchair, I was able to basically park my car, get out in the wheelchair, and go wheel around and enjoy the Jazz Festival, which again, not the most significant thing, but in terms of living the life you want, why deprive yourself of that enjoyment of being involved in a festival when you could have the help, that small little assistive device. And what was interesting was that when I got the wheelchair, while the wheelchair actually made me in some ways stronger and more able to do stuff, the perception of people is that someone in a wheelchair is somehow sick or weak, or Michael's getting worse. I was in a relationship at the time, and the relationship ended up ending in part because of the disability, which was a little bit weird because one of my friends joked that it took her a year and a half to realize that you're disabled, which is a valid point. So yeah, if a guy can take off his leg, that's a tip for your listeners. If a guy can take off his leg while doing relationships, we'll leave it at that to keep it clean. That's probably a pretty good sign that there's something going on. That's not so much a joke as a skill I'm proud of. So I like showing that off whenever possible. So I think the relationship, so because of this whole thing about, and when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I remembered one point, my ex, at the time we were living together, and she was changing the bed and needed help changing the bed. So I went in and kind of bench press the mattress up over my head because I'm like, see, I can do that. And the mattress was really heavy. So then I went out of the room and I'm like, ow, that was not smart. So moral of the story, do not lift mattresses over your head. They're heavy. So I kind of started, and that's actually how I got into. So aside from doing the CFO or breakaway that you had mentioned, I also do the speaking and comedy because I wanted to start doing basically showing people what people with disabilities were capable of, and that we were still able to do stuff. And I started a website called Sure I Can. And I joked that the reason I called it Sure I Can was because I didn't, saying I can too sounded very immature, because I just was tired of people assuming that because I had this disability, I wasn't capable of doing things. Like I've always, another good example, I was out, so around the same time that I got my wheelchair, I moved out into my own condo. And I went to get furniture, and being an accountant, I like the whole no interest for 36 months. So when it came time to get the financing, with every single person I spoke to, at the store was like, well, how are you getting financing? I'm like, well, I work. And I mean, I was working as a CPA and I mean, making a good income. And they all were shocked that I'm disabled and I work. And I'm like, okay, I sit at a computer doing Excel spreadsheets. You don't use feet to do that. And I mean, a physical disability doesn't impact on your intellectual capacity to do. And that's actually why in my bio, I always mention the CPA and the MBA. It's not to brag. It's that just because someone has a physical disability does not mean that they're not able to achieve things academically and have a career. So I kind of got into the speaking with the effort of showing what people could do, people with disabilities could do. And over time, as I started talking to people, I realized a few important things. One was that we all face, I jokingly say we all face challenges. Mine just give me better parking spots. But that's why I've kind of moved away from using the show I can to my new slogan of shining light on abilities, because we all have challenges that we have to overcome. And I mean, I look at my friends and everyone has something, right? We all go through something in our life that we need to deal with. I mean, obviously some are a little greater than others, but there's something, right? So I think I've kind of moved to, instead of proving to people what someone with a disability can do, just live my life, right? And that's kind of become my new philosophy. Do my thing. Instead of trying, so for example, I gave the example of the whole mattress thing. When I broke up with my ex-girlfriend, this is actually funny, I wanted to prove that I could cook. So I went out and I got a book on healthy cooking and that I could cook. And after a while, I realized, okay, you know what? I don't really enjoy cooking. I'm busy doing other stuff. Why am I doing this to prove that I can cook? So it actually was funny because I gave the cookbook to a neighbor of mine who liked cooking. And it was good because then they invited me to eat. So I actually got part of the recipe from the cookbook. They were like, this cookbook is fantastic. We're really enjoying it. I'm like, I'm enjoying it too. That's good. I pick up a bottle of wine and we have a good time. So I've kind of progressed in that. Instead of proving that I can cook, I can now report I've lived in Ottawa 3 years. The only part of my oven that I know that works is the little plug where I plug in my Keurig coffee machine. So I don't cook. Toast oven, microwave gets me by. But it comes back to what I was saying, right? About living the life you want. I don't enjoy cooking, so I don't find another way to do it, right? So I think, I think it's really, if there's one thing I've learned, it's don't, and it comes back to what I said about success on your own terms. Not, instead of doing stuff to prove to people you can, do what you enjoy, and you can be a good example by doing that, right?
So do what you enjoy and you can be a success. Was it hard for you to do what you enjoyed at first?
I did. Well, I think because I was so hell-bent on proving that I could do what I could do whatever anyone else could do, right? As opposed to looking, okay, well, what do you really want to do? And I think over life, I've kind of learned that life is short. None of us know how much time we've got, so focus on doing what you want to do. For me, that is trying to have as positive an impact as I can on the world around me. But to find that, how do you want your life to look like? That's what I would challenge people to figure out. And I think the important thing to remember is, and I know it sounds like a magical thing. Oh, well, just do whatever you want. I mean, yes, you need an income. You need to pay your bill. You need to support your family, all the rest of it. So maybe there's doing both, right? So as an example, when I started doing comedy, I loved doing comedy and educating people on what people with disabilities could do. But I also had a day job, right? That helped me pay my mortgage. And so I joke that I get to play with my Excel spreadsheets during the day, and at night I can go be creative and tell jokes. Because I think we've learned from the WorldComs and the Enrons of the world that accountants getting creative is not a good thing. So I leave my creativity for the comedy stage. So I think it's important when you're living the life you want. There's also, I remember I once was joking with a friend that it's important to be happy, but you also don't see many homeless people who are happy, right? So I think that it's important to remember that balance of, okay, well, how are you looking after your finances? And I remember it was interesting. I actually, when I used to work at McGill University, and I was doing a mentor program, so mentoring staff. And I remember I had a student who was graduating, and she was all nervous about getting a job in her field and this and that. And like I told her, okay, you know what, relax. Don't worry so much about. I think we're conditioned to have all the answers right away, right? Like from day one, we're gonna go do this, and no, we're gonna have a job that we're gonna work at, and then work towards that life that you want, building that life you want. It's not going to be tomorrow that you wake up and everything's perfect. You have to work towards it, right? So have a vision of what it is you want to do and what are the steps you need to get there, and work towards it. And I think an important thing is don't be afraid to fail, right? Everyone does that. I'm sure everyone has seen that picture of people think success just looks like that, and it's really kind of detours and a whole bunch of turns. And I can honestly say, in my life, I've had experiences. Some were good, some were bad. There's absolutely none that I regret or any decisions I regret, because it's all part of the process, right? It's experiences I've gone through are what has gotten me to where I am today, and made me the person I am today.
So, Michael, I really appreciate you sharing your journey. And I knew you more when you were in the previous frame of mind. So I'm excited for you with this illuminability, the shining a light on abilities.
Yep.
Yeah, beautiful. And you were talking about figuring out what the life of your dreams is. Could you share a little bit what practical things that you did to figure out what that was?
I think it comes down to the question, okay, well, what are the things you do that makes you happy?
Okay. So in your case?
You that you don't like. Okay, and make yourself a list and write it down and say, okay, you know what, so for example, I love doing comedy. Okay, so I make a point of making time that I can go do my comedy. Fantastic. The things you don't like doing, do you have to be doing them? That would be my first question. If you do have to do them, okay. So for example, it could be something you don't like doing laundry. Okay, well, kind of has to get done. So, okay, that's not, or what are the things that stress you? Is it something you need to do? And if not, drop it, right? So, for example, um, accounting is my profession, but I may not necessarily enjoy doing accounting all the time. So I won't take on, I like giving back to my community, but I don't necessarily like doing accounting. So I will volunteer, but not volunteering to do accounting. Um, and I think it's a good exercise to sit down and say, okay, what gives you joy? What don't you like as much? And the stuff you figure out a way that you can make income doing the stuff you like. So, for example, I enjoy comedy. I've started promoting my own comedy show that I run once a month to try and generate some more income from doing that. So I think that's an exercise I would suggest people doing. And make time for the things that make you happy. What are those things that are important for you, and make sure you schedule time for that, whether it's lucrative or not, right? Whether you're making money off of it or not, because money's not the end all and be all. And then the stuff you're not happy on, is there a way you could move to something that would make you happy? So for example, in my case, accounting, working for a company or working in a job was not as interesting for me as having my own thing. So I created my own business and started, so I do accounting, but for myself. And looking after my own business. That for me was more rewarding. So that I've done that. So I think that's an exercise I would suggest people doing for themselves. Because it's kind of hard to be happy and live the life you want if you don't know what makes you happy and what is the life you want. So I think that's kind of the first step. And then come up with a plan of how you're going to get to that life. And it could be compromise, right? Okay, well, I don't like my job, but I need a paycheck. Okay, well, how can I move? What can I do to work towards getting my income from what I enjoy? How would I do that, right? And figure that out. Come up with a plan. If it's that I'm going to need X number of clients, okay, well, how am I going to get that number of clients, right? So come up with a plan of how you're going to get there, right? Because I think there's the danger. A lot of times people say dream about the life you want. It's not enough just to dream about it. You actually have to come up with a plan how to do it, because just because you dream it doesn't mean it's going to happen, right?
But just a sec, you said not to over-plan it though either.
I don't think, so when I say over-plan it, I think it's be open to opportunities. Right? It's like there's a lot of stuff I do that does it seem to be consistent with, like, let's say I have an opportunity. Okay, I'll give you a perfect example is this speaker series. When I thought about what my year and what my life, I didn't know you were doing this speaker series, right? But so obviously it couldn't be part of my plan, but when you told me about it, I'm like, yeah, that's consistent with my goals, with my values, with what the message I'm trying to spread. It seems like a great platform to get my message out, so let's do it.
Okay.
I think it's about being open, as opposed to saying, okay, well, that wasn't part of my plan for this year, so I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
So I think your plan needs to have some flexibility. But in general terms, how are you going to get to where you want to go?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's you know, it's like it's common sense what you're sharing, But sometimes we can get so caught up in just living our life, in the challenges in our life, in the forgetting what makes us happy. It's good to hear a basic primer, reminder, do a list, what I don't like, what I don't like, what I like and what I don't like. You know, everything that you've just said, I think it's just fabulous, nice and straightforward and practical and helpful. You know, it's a primer.
Well, because I think if I think sometimes we make it too complicated, right? And we think and we start thinking about if we make something seem too big, it seems impossible to conquer, right?
Yeah.
Well, afterwards we're going to talk about what my free gift is, but I'll just
Sure.
mention it a little bit as it fits here. So I actually had done a one-man show back in 2011 at the Montreal Fringe Festival, and it was called Conquer Your Mountains. And my analogy the reason I say conquer your mountains, and the analogy I use is speed bumps versus mountains. Sometimes something's a little speed bump and we make it into a mountain.
Yeah.
And that's why you were saying, like, it's, and I agree with you, it is a very simple, basic strategy, but sometimes we think living the life is this huge, complex thing that take it in small baby steps and take things as those little speed bumps, right? Because I guarantee you we're going to hit them. Like we said before, success is not that straight line, right? So even if you come up with the list of things you hate, things you don't, things you like, and you have a plan of how you're going to live the life you want, there's going to be those little speed bumps. And I think it comes down to keeping things in perspective and not making things worse than they are. Another thing I would suggest, there's one thing, we all have bad days, right? So we come home and we're just all stressed out. And I try to always remind myself. So for myself, when I have a rough day or things don't go quite as I had planned, I just like sitting down in front of the TV, shut my brain off, relax a bit, take a deep breath, go to sleep, and start fresh the next day. And a thing I always like to remind myself, and again, this is pretty basic, the fact that I'm able to come home to my apartment, turn on my TV, relax, and go sleep in a warm bed at night, I'm doing better than a lot of people in this world, right? There's a lot of people that don't have that luxury, right? So that's where I think keeping things in perspective, maybe your bad day was not as bad as you think it was, right?
Yeah. You know, that's the Conquer Your Mountains. I'm really looking forward to you telling us more about that, but I do have one more question for you.
Shoot.
And that's, of everything that you shared with the audience today, what is the one message you want them to take away with them?
I think it's really that whole thing about success on your own terms.
Okay.
Because if you're going to be busy always trying to prove yourself, there's always going to be people who don't think you're good enough, who don't think you can do something, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And we've all had it. I love the analogy. There's a story about Thomas Edison. And the story is that someone once said to Thomas Edison, Tom, you tried to come up with a way to create light and electricity, and you failed 10,000 times. And he corrected him. He goes, it's not that I failed 10,000 times. I was successful in finding 10,000 ways that don't work. And
I love
I
that.
love exactly, and I think it's a great way to remember that there's always going to be those negative people. So I think it's important to remember, and sometimes those negative people are ourself, right? That's
Right.
out. So I think it's important to remember, figure out what it is you want, and the keyword is what you want. I'm going to underline, bold, highlight the word you, because if you're doing it for someone else, it's not going to be powerful enough. It's got to be something you want and that you're passionate about.
Mm.
And that may very well be working a job, because I know people think what you want is starting your own business. It could be working a job, because working a job gives you the income that you're able to have the life that you want. And that's cool. That's fabulous. So I think if there's one thing, what do you, again, underlining you, want? Figure that out, because I firmly believe if you don't know what you want, you're not going to be happy, right? Uh, that's the reality of it, or at least what I believe to be the reality of it.
Mm-hmm. So figure out what you, capital bold, highlight, underline, you want, and then do it.
Right, so that's the key part. Thank you. That's the key thing is do it.
Yeah. Well, I knew you meant that.
Yeah. And I mean, do it. And I think when doing it, and this comes back to what I had mentioned about the wheelchair, nobody does it by themselves.
Yeah.
I have a fantastic group of friends, entrepreneurs who support me in what I do. And without that, I so I think it's important being willing to ask for help. Um, I remember when I had my accounting practice, there was a client who said, "Do you mind if I share your contact info with my friend, because I think she could use your help?" And to me, it was just a bizarre question, because of course I want, but I realized I never asked people that I'm looking for new clients, right? So you don't necessarily know. So I think if um, you don't have to do it alone. Asking for help, I think we have this misconception that asking for help somehow makes us look weak. To me, it actually makes us look smart, because nobody does it alone.
Yeah.
Any successful person has a team behind them. That look at any great company, um, Richard Branson, right? Virgin Mobile. I'm sure we would
Yeah.
all agree he's very successful. He also has his employees, his team that
Yeah.
helps him
No,
execute.
that's a good point. So the takeaway is figure what you, big bold letters, want, do it, and get help doing it.
Right. Exactly.
Beautiful. Did you want to tell us about your gift?
Sure. So the gift. So like I said, back in 2011, I had done a one-man show called Conquer Your Mountains, which I basically called it comedic motivation. So it was a comedic look at my experiences growing up with a disability, and what I feel that talks that can teach anyone about overcoming challenges. So I think it fit kind of nice with the whole theme of living the life you want. And so basically, it's like I said, comedic look, living with a disability, and how I've overcome my disability, or I deal with my disability, and what I think that can teach us about facing our own challenges. Largely because, like I said, we all face challenges. Mine just give me better parking spots. So after doing the show, I actually had recorded a CD, and I have an MP3. So they're actually my gift to the viewers, if they'd like to go to the link that will be provided, they can download a free copy of the MP3.
Oh, cool.
And I'd love to hear what they. Feel free to contact me and let me know what you thought of it.
Yeah.
I always like hearing what people think. So that's the little gift giveaway.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you to the listeners for tuning in to listen to Michael. And I always enjoy chatting with Michael. He's always got a few jokes up his sleeve and just makes things fun. And tune in for more interviews with more experts, all with bringing their own approach, their own life experience to either overcoming adversity, being happy, or living the life of your dreams, or a little bit of everything. The experts are incredible that we've had. And so tune in tomorrow for more. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.